Bombshell news as Marilyn Manson, he ends up with a monster win, and his main accuser, Evan Rachel Wood, she loses big time. See, Marilyn Manson gets to put Evan Rachel Wood on blast. And on top of that, she makes the classic Amber Heard mistake. That allows him a potential discovery win in the future. As Evan Rachel Wood, she ends up losing in the courtroom. I mean, essentially, she has to settle with her ex about custody. She tries to blame Marilyn Manson for everything. And guess what? Marilyn Manson, he gets the last word, and his last word, it is powerful. All of this, it looks really bad for Evan Rachel Wood too, because at the end of the day, you're talking about a 7-year-old that was reportedly emotionally damaged and terrified by her. If there's no Manson, well, she's to blame. You and I, we're going to talk about that and so much more today too. Crazy times, huh? Crazy times indeed. All right, so hey there to all you fine folks on this fine day, by the way. I hope you are doing excellently. So Marilyn Manson, he just got a huge win, and the reason for that? Evan Rachel Wood. That's right, she's the one that gave him to him. See, essentially, Evan Rachel Wood, she ends up in trouble with the court, and she is forced to give up custody of her child. When that happens, she starts spinning things like this, saying, hey, I had to do that because of Marilyn Manson. And people around Marilyn Manson, they decided to put all of this on blast, to call it out, and guess what? For the first time, really, people are actually listening. See, Evan Rachel Wood, she had some horrible allegations against her. This is about her 7-year-old, by the way. Essentially, she kidnaps the kid. She absconds, takes him to another state. She won't allow visitation at first. She allows a little FaceTime. Finally, she lets the father see when they have joint custody, and what he hears is absolutely alarming. Why? Because the child is terrified and emotionally damaged because he thinks Marilyn Manson is a boogeyman. I mean, listen to this stuff here. I would also like the court to know that Evan's recent behavior with Jack is truly alarming. Evan is thankfully still facilitating FaceTime, though that is the only contact I have with Jack now, apart from her recent concession to let me see Jack in Florida. So there you have, you can't see him. Well, I'm going to give you something there because, again, ran off with the child. Now, during a FaceTime call I had with Jack back in February 25th, 2021, Jack said something to the effect of, "You're not good, Daddy. You're not here." It broke my heart. And that would be heartbreaking, by the way, especially if somebody took your child. A few weeks earlier, Jack told me he drew a picture of the man who has been hurting him. Now, Evan Rachel Wood, who is listening in on this, she has to correct that. She jumps in on the call. She says, "No, not the man that's hurting you, Jack. That's the man that's hurting me." So he is hearing at 7 years old all of the things that Evan Rachel Wood is saying about Marilyn Manson. See, Jack said that the man's name is Brian. That would be Marilyn Manson's real name. He lives 3 miles from my house in Los Angeles and said that is why he is staying in Nashville. So again, they go from California to Tennessee, even though they're supposed to have shared custody. Evan's initial contention as to why she failed to return Jack to California was because she says she is involved in a high-profile investigation regarding supposed abuse by Brian. I have nothing to do with this investigation, but Evan contends that she is now fearful for her and Jack's safety. So the spin, by the way, is that, hey, she decides to make an agreement. If she's saying this, no, she didn't do that voluntarily. That is a loss in the court. During our recent stipulated visitation that Evan allowed my in-laws' house in Florida, Jack voiced his concern for his safety and reminded us repeatedly of the man who hurt his mom and displayed emotional outbursts related to the case his mother is involved in. When I mentioned fun things to do in the future, Jack told me that he could only do them, quote unquote, if Brian is in jail. I am absolutely appalled and terrified that Evan is feeding this information to our 7-year-old. Now, not only does Evan Rachel Wood end up losing big time here, but you have Marilyn Manson get 2 huge wins here. The first, its potential discovery. I mean, essentially, you have Evan Rachel Wood make the classic Amber Heard mistake. I mean, when you're running PR, when you're going out, you're making statements, you're pointing fingers at somebody, that allows them to potentially bring it up in the court. And the second is the PR itself. I mean, if you look at headlines, and she's gotten away with this quite a bit. I mean, she's basically had her narrative and her narrative alone presented. Yeah, she says, I had to give up custody of my son. Why? Marilyn Manson. Now, things go a lot different this time, with people around Manson refusing to stay silent, and on top of that, networks listen. Why? Because a lot of people, they looked at this case, they looked at what went on, and they were like, wait a minute here. I mean, what does it really have to do with Marilyn Manson? And people around Marilyn Manson are like, nothing. I mean, essentially, it deals with her as a mother, and Marilyn Manson, he hasn't talked to her in almost a decade. I mean, listen to these quotes here. There are 2 of them. Now, this first quote is an absolute bombshell. This is from, quote unquote, a person close to Manson. They're ending up talking to Fox Digital. They say, quote, Evan is blaming Manson to cover up the fact that she's an unfit mother. She didn't give up custody. She lost it, and that has nothing to do with Manson. And by the way, I actually agree with the loss portion of that, because again, she takes the kid. She kidnaps them, takes them to another state. She refuses the joint custody situation. She fights it tooth and nail. Then suddenly she's going to give up custody. Yeah, that's her knowing that she's lost, but she doesn't want those headlines. That's the way I see that. Then they bring the absolute thunder, putting Evan Rachel Wood on blast by saying, quote, Brian Warner has not had any contact or communication of any kind with Evan Rachel Wood in nearly a decade. They follow that up, too, by saying at no time has Brian Warner ever threatened Miss Wood or her family. Wood has not provided a single shred of evidence of Warner making any threats against her or her family. That right there, again, that's putting someone on blast. That's saying, people, they have been listening to this. They have been believing these narratives when there's no information supplied at all. This kind of stuff, this is how you end up in the court, like I say. That was the classic Amber Heard mistake. That's how you ended up with Charity. You ended up with so much more. Yeah, there's 2 wins here. Huge loss for Evan Rachel Wood. Looks terrible for her, in my opinion. But let me know what you think about that. And as always, I appreciate the heck out of you, too. You make this stuff work. Thank you. Can't say that enough. Check out the channel, links, share it, all of that. Thank you. Ending here.